Hey, folks, it's Wednesday. We are turning the corner towards the weekend. We're going to get there. And also on the podcast daily, we're turning back to the corners with our spring review. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Let's dive right into it. This is another one we could make it really short, Bill. Like the cornerbacks are good. The end.
Yeah, because now like the young guys have made it boring too. It's like we knew the starters were good. Then we watch a spring game. It's like everybody in this room is good. So like I don't know what to talk about with this group other than to tell you that they're awesome and they're going to be awesome for the next few years. And I don't know, as long as Tim Walton decides he wants to coach at Ohio State.
He's pretty good. I think the most remarkable thing we've seen is how just the depth has transformed itself in the last 2 years. And to get back Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock for this season, when I don't think at like mid-November last year, I don't think anyone thought either of those things was really possible. It is now puts the onus on Tim Walton to figure out, how do you use the rest of that depth? How do you use Jermaine Matthews? How do you use Kelvin Simpson-Hunt? What type of role is there for Aaron Scott or Miles Lockhart? You know, how do you find a way to make sure in this new era of college football that these guys are getting enough run, that they're not being poached by someone else, but also that you're playing your best. And I think that's where the Ohio State schedule should again come in handy. The schedule this season, especially those first 5 weeks, is wide open for the Buckeyes to do pretty much whatever they want. And I hope that we'll see a lot of depth playing early.
We could spice things up by putting Miles Walker at cornerback. I'd be okay with that. Throw the 6'7" tackle out there. Let's do it.
I don't think that's the right idea, Bill.
Just
also,
in case.
You couldn't come up with an alliterative way to say Wednesday with the cornerbacks?
No, that's if I do it every day, that'll get really old quick and it'll be too hard for me to continue. So that's out today. But it could be a Walton Wednesday, Berm. How about that? How has he put together this? Like after his first year at Ohio State, we were getting a ton of questions like, can Tim Walton do this? And we talked about the number of injuries in the room that he inherited as that part of it. And like, hey, maybe just give it a little bit of patience and see what transpires. And then 1 year later, he became a hero. But is it that simple? He just needed that time, Berm?
Yes. And I think that it's also a prime example of the fact that sometimes we say explanations aren't excuses. And that is what I really think that we were trying in the 2022 season to explain to people, like, there is no depth here. They are completely down to scraps. And the guys that they do have are hurt and they can't really do much. And there's a lot of times people are like, oh, that's excuses. You're making excuses for the team or wearing scarlet color sunglasses. But like, it's not an excuse. It's just an explanation for why things maybe don't look the way you want them to look. And then you see a year later, Tim Walton didn't just all of a sudden learn how to coach or all of a sudden learn how to recruit. Like, he knew what he was doing prior to that. It just took a little bit of time for things to get where they needed to be. And for the roster, which, as good as Kerry Combs was in his first go round with Ohio State recruiting corners, the room was not exactly loaded for Tim Walton when he walked in. So, they were starting a true freshman at corner in Denzel Burke in 2021 that was mostly a wide receiver in high school. And like, I don't know I don't think things were really quite as ready to go and loaded for bear as people want to believe.
In 2021, didn't they start the opener with a pair of freshmen out there? Didn't Ryan Watts start that game as well?
Yeah, and Legend Cavazos played a whole bunch. I mean, it's not like Tim Walton was taking over a murderer's row lineup in corner for Ohio State in 2022.
That does put it in a little bit more perspective of how quickly Tim Walton has turned this room over, though, to me, Bill.
Yeah. No offense to the aforementioned players, but
hey, my wife got drafted. Like, awesome, way to go!
That is true. Ryan wants to get drafted. But no, there were a couple of years there where it was pretty bleak, I think, at cornerback. Just combination of not having the top end talent you expect, and we've seen that first round cornerback pipeline stall out temporarily. I think we have a very good chance of seeing it come back next year and then into the future. But that's the expectation that Ohio State has for the position, and certainly it hasn't. Well, it was there last year, but prior to that, it wasn't up to that standard. And then the depth too. Like, you want there's just never been a question, right? It's like you knew who was going to be starting was going to be good, and you could reasonably expect and be comfortable with like whoever was next up was going to be ready to take the reins when their time came. And we're back to that now. I think thankfully for Ohio State fans, I think it's clear we're back to that. But yeah, I mean, 2 years ago it was far, far from that. So it's been a pretty ridiculous turnaround for Tim Walton. And like we say his name a lot too, but like the players deserve credit as well. Like, and I put Denzel Burke at the top of that list for kind of, I don't know, getting that room back into shape, right? Like kind of resetting the standard of what it means to be an Ohio State cornerback. And that's probably something that he struggled with a little bit too early in his career, like experiencing immediate success and then not having the sophomore year that he wanted. Part of that, or a great deal of that, was probably just not being healthy. But certainly last year, he came back and looked the part of like CB1 for Ohio State, and will be that again this year.
Denzel Burke certainly changes the picture dramatically for Ohio State. And then that forces the only real uncertainty conversation is like, okay, well then how many of these guys are actually going to play? Because we assume that Jermaine Matthews will make it a 3-way deal at the top of the depth chart with Davison Igbinosun. And I mean, I don't know that we totally agree on between the three of us how that's going to look, because I have made a bold prediction and I'm not going to back down off of it now because it's May and nothing has changed for me in the last 2 weeks since spring ended, that I think he may surpass Davison Igbinosun. Berm has gone further and say that Davison Igbinosun is going to, I think, be the best Ohio State corner, surpassing Denzel Burke.
I think he's going to be the highest drafted Ohio State corner.
Okay. Well, I mean, isn't that the same thing? Isn't that what we're talking about? That means you think he's...
No, I don't necessarily think that means he's going to be the most productive or have the best stats or any of that. I just think his combination of traits combined with stats, once he gets into the combine setting in front of the NFL, like his length, his speed, and then you put on the tape, I just think he's going to be a guy that's going to be highly, highly coveted by NFL teams.
It kind of feels like, sorry to cut you off, Austin. It kind of feels a little bit like the dynamic we saw at Alabama last year, where like everyone thought Kool-Aid McKinstry was Alabama's best cornerback, and then Terry and Arnold came along and became like, what was he, a top 15 pick? But Kool-Aid McKinstry also ended up being like the 40th pick in the draft, and I think Denzel Burke will still be a first round pick. But it just turns out they have two good ones. I think I'm with Berm. I'm on team IGB is going to be a first rounder, and I think perhaps the first corner drafted because the measurables and the tape will be there. But that doesn't mean Denzel Burke is bad. I think they're both first round corners.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be the first corner overall drafted, because I think Will Johnson will be. But
on the team, on the team,
yeah. I think that his combination of traits makes him slightly more appealing to the NFL folks.
So last year, teams made it very clear they were not going to throw on Denzel, and they were willing to take their chances with Davison Igbinosun. Are you expecting that then to flip, Bill?
No, they're just not going to throw the ball.
Oh, okay.
They're not going to throw it either of them. No, I mean, you have to throw to one side of the field, right? So it's not. I don't know. I don't really
throw to the wide side of the field.
Yeah, I didn't take that as teams didn't think Davison Igbinosun was good. I took that as we're going to throw to the side of the field where there's more space.
Okay. I'll accept that. So then what do we think for the, if I'm wrong, what will the workload for Jermaine Matthews look like? Bill? Berm?
I think he plays. Like I think I don't think it'll be like a 3-way even split between Denzel, Davison, and Jermaine. And I don't know that it'll be 50-50. If like Denzel just doesn't come off the field, I don't think it'll be 50-50 on the other side between Davison and Jermaine either. But like I could see it being like 70-30. Maybe Davison plays more than Jermaine does. But I also think now we should entertain the thought of Jermaine Matthews also maybe playing some nickel when Jordan Hancock's not out there, right? If we're trying to save guys' energy, like steal some snaps, keep in mind that it's going to be a longer season, which seems to be front of mind for Ohio State, then I think like playing depth and rotating guys probably includes putting Jermaine Matthews out there at nickel. And I think he looked excellent in the spring game, in my opinion, playing that spot. So that's another opportunity for him to get on the field. So I don't have his snap counts in front of me to know what he played last year, but I think he's going to play probably 400-ish snaps between corner and nickel next year.
Yeah, I don't think, and I don't mean to split the baby on it, but I don't know that you have to be wrong for me to be right. And I think that you're going to see a ton of Jermaine Matthews. And I wouldn't be surprised if total snap counts by the end of the season looked similar between him and Igbinosun, but that Jermaine's were split between slot and the outside corner. So I think you could actually see both of them play pretty close to the same number of reps, but you're going to be able to do things with this defense that you haven't in the past. And they're also in a position where they know that they have to make sure guys like that play, and Calvin Simpson-Hunt has to play. And again, like Lorenzo Styles has to play. Like there's a lot of things that they have to figure out because the room is so much better than it was 2 years ago. So that's not a bad problem to have, obviously, but it does require you to get a little bit creative.
Yeah, it's absolutely a luxury that they have so much depth and high-end talent there. It feels to me like throughout spring until the injury for Lorenzo Styles that I think it was the shoulder there late in April, like he was probably going to be the one that was next in line there to help, and instead of Jermaine Matthews and nickel. But I mean, there's probably a world where all three of them are playing in there, as that spot has shifted now to towards more of a corner rather than a safety as it was when Jim Knowles got here.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like pretty much on the Lorenzo Styles train, and now like I'm just a little bummed that we didn't get to see what that looks like in the spring game. So that probably remains a competition, and I think you're right. I think you probably will see all three of them there. I also wonder too how much you might see Lorenzo on the outside. Like, does Lorenzo play on the outside when like things are really out of hand? Right. I think clearly the top three corners are Denzel, Davison, and Jermaine, but there's going to be opportunities to play 4 or 5, I think, on the outside. And that's where you start talking about Calvin Simpson-Hunt probably first and foremost. But then I think you get to Lorenzo Styles maybe if you want to throw him outside and see what it looks like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there is, you go now 6 deep, I think, with guys that it seems like Tim Walton is getting close to trusting. Obviously, Lorenzo Styles slowed down a little bit because of the shoulder work that he had to have done on him. But Aaron Scott was going up, and Aaron Scott was a player in the class of 2023 that Ohio State valued as much as anybody in the country. And if you see, and we know we were fortunate enough to do the Buck 9 with Denzel Burke, and he was glowing, talking about Aaron Scott. And like, there's obviously, it's probably not going to happen this year for Aaron, which I think maybe heading into Ohio State, he believed it would. But then all of a sudden, Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock return, and now plans shift. But there are opportunities to play those guys. And I think Ohio State has to make some decisions across their entire roster. Like, is it more important to have the starters in there in the fourth quarter, in week 5, or is it worth saying to Aaron Scott and Lorenzo Styles and Calvin Simpson-Hunt week 2, like, you guys are going to play the second, third, and fourth quarter, and that's it. And because you're not going to lose that game no matter what. So, like, I personally think you could almost put that out there and say, hey, you know what? We're playing Akron today. Denzel, Jordan, Jermaine, Davison, you guys are going to play a quarter and be done. And I think you could get by in that game and do that. And I hope they do.
What do you do for 3 quarters? You get a glass of lemonade and just kind of kick back and watch it happen? Or
no, Bill, mental reps, bud. Mental reps.
It's a rep, mental rep. Take a swig of lemonade. Then you pretend to take a swig of lemonade. That's a mental.
I don't know if lemonade is like the right drink for an athletic event. Number 1, it's like a diuretic. It just makes you have to tinkle. Number 2, it's full of salt and sugar. Just sugar, not salt.
You're putting salt in your lemonade.
Unless you have salt on the rim, and it's actually a margarita.
Which you're staunchly opposed to, what I learned from watching Talking Stuff earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why anyone does that.
I like how Berm used to give me a hard time about skipping past Big Ten opponents and not taking them seriously. And suddenly, like, Michigan State and Iowa are just like complete garbage. And nobody.
I said
week 4. You said week 4 and week 5. You've said it in like every show for the last 2 weeks. You have 5 weeks to get ready for Oregon. I'm telling you, that Iowa game is not going to be a walk in the park for anybody. And Michigan State, crazy things always seem to happen in that series.
Look,
and you know that better than anyone.
You've got 3 weeks with Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall, where Ohio State should be able to play their backups and win comfortably. Okay,
I am not disputing that in any way, shape, or form.
You just gloss over Big Ten opponents. If I said that, it's just hyperbole. What I am saying is you have 3 weeks to get things done, and there's no reason against Akron, who I don't think has a quarterback on its roster, that you should have to play 3 starting potential first-round cornerbacks in order to win the game. That's all I'm saying.
Joe Moore's going with the no QB offense up there.
Who is their quarterback? I don't know.
It's not DJ Irons isn't there anymore.
It might still be DJ Irons. He's an athlete, pretty good athlete, but I don't know that you're worried about him beating you through the air.
Yeah, he's still at Akron.
Probably not a major concern for Ohio State.
I think. I don't know.
I mean, again, name me one Akron wide receiver off the top of your head.
I don't know anyone who plays at Akron. Why would I be watching Akron football?
Their quarterbacks are you ready? Johnny Brookhart, Taj Bullock, Ben Finley, Braden Rogow, and Steele Wassel.
I read that guy's name quickly and thought his name was Steel Weasel and got really excited, but it's not.
Would be a great name. They are not a team that has landed any.
It's four freshmen and a junior, by the way.
Right, they're not a team that is picking up a bunch of guys in the transfer portal that are borderline D1, high D1 players. You play your starters in the first quarter and then you get them out of there because that's what you need to do. You got to get reps for these other guys. And you got to keep the main ones healthy.
Ohio State's cornerback room is good when we spent more time talking about who is on Akron's roster than Calvin Simpson-Hunt.
What's insane?
Here's a question. Would Calvin Simpson-Hunt be Akron's best quarterback?
Without question.
What's insane here is
the ball and get out of the way.
Next year, you're looking at Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt and Aaron Scott and Bryce West and Miles Lockhart and Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offord. And it's only going to get better high-end talent-wise for Ohio State at corner. And that's really where what Tim Walton has done is patently absurd. And it's only going to continue to get better and longer. You've got Davis Igbinosun, who looks like that mutant, freaky athlete type that you look at. And then nobody else on the roster really looks like him. And then there's Aaron Scott starting to creep up. And then you add Offord and Devin Sanchez. And it's now we got 4 of those guys. Cool. It's going to get weird.
The weird part now is that aberration where the first round streak ended and the pipeline seemed to dry up overnight. You went from Denzel Ward and Garyon Conley and Marshawn Lattimore and this is going to go on forever. It's so easy to recruit here. And then all of a sudden it just disappeared for several years. And then it was somebody accidentally turned off the light switch. And then Mark Pantoni just walked in there and Tim Walton saw it. I don't know. They both did. Maybe they both had to turn keys. It was more complicated than you think. Hey, we need to turn this back on. And then the assembly line is cranking again.
We got Tavord.
Yeah, I was going to say Taver Johnson turned off the light switch.
Set Tavers to stunned.
Oh, yeah. All right. Nice. Well, that's probably a good place to end it on the podcast daily for Wednesday. A look at the corners, which I think we are in unanimous agreement. They are very good, and the assembly line is cranking again for the Buckeyes. And we learned a lot about Akron's quarterbacks. For whatever that's worth, take that on for the rest of your day. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I am Austin Ward. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.